be me, 28, working a decent IT job, live in an apartment with my girlfriend, Sasha. We'd been together for a bit, over 2 years. When we first met, she was awesome. Smart, funny, really passionate about her beliefs. I respected that, even if I didn't always agree with everything. It's good for people to care about stuff, you know? But over time, that passion started to feel less like a worldview and more like a rule book. A rule book that only I was expected to follow. It started small. Little comments about the movies I watched. Don't you think the female characters are a little one-dimensional? This plot line is kind of reinforcing harmful stereotypes. At first, I'd engage with it, have a discussion. But there was no discussion. There was her opinion, and there was my incorrect one. My opinion was usually labeled as me having internalized misogyny, or not being able to see past my own privilege. So I learned to just nod. Yeah, I can see that. It was easier. Then it moved on to my hobbies. I've been playing video games since I was a kid. It's how I unwind and keep in touch with my buddies who live in different cities. To her, my gaming was a source of toxic masculinity. She'd say the games were problematic, that the online communities were cesspools. She wasn't entirely wrong about some communities, but she painted everything with the same brush. My weekly session with my friends became a point of contention. She'd sigh loudly whenever I put on my headset. She'd walk past the office and make comments about me yelling with a bunch of angry man-children. Again, I stopped fighting it. I just played when she was out or after she went to bed. It felt like I was hiding something, even though I was just playing a game with my friends. My best friend, Carl, was another target. Carl is a very straightforward, no-nonsense guy. He's married, has a kid on the way, super reliable. Sasha decided he was a bad influence. She said he represented traditional masculinity in a negative way. This was because he once told a story about fixing his own sink instead of calling a plumber. Apparently, this demonstrated a compulsive need for self-reliance that prevents men from being vulnerable. I tried to explain he was just trying to save money, but the verdict was in. Soon, whenever I said I was going to hang out with Carl, she'd get this disappointed look. Oh, okay. Just try not to let him drag you down into his caveman mindset. It got to the point where I felt like I was living in a minefield. Every conversation, every choice, every opinion was analyzed through her specific lens. The way I sat on the couch was manspreading. The way I offered to carry the heavy groceries was benevolent sexism. The way I tried to solve a problem she was having was mansplaining. I wasn't allowed to just be. I was a collection of problematic behaviors that needed to be corrected. Her main tool for correction, her nuclear option, was the silent treatment. Anytime I pushed back, even gently, she would deploy it. If I said, "Hey, I think you're being a little unfair," she'd shut down. She wouldn't just be quiet. It was an active, aggressive silence. She would refuse to acknowledge my existence. She'd walk past me like I was a piece of furniture. If I asked a direct question, she would just stare at me with a cold, blank expression before turning and walking away. It was incredibly effective. The atmosphere in the apartment would become unbearable, thick with tension. I hate conflict, and I hate that feeling of someone being angry with me. Usually, after a day or two, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd break. I would apologize. For what? I was never really sure. For having my own opinion? For not immediately agreeing? It didn't matter. I'd say I was sorry, that I'd try to be more understanding. She would then graciously accept my apology, often followed by a long lecture about why she was right and how I needed to do the work to educate myself. And then things would go back to normal, which was just me walking on eggshells until the next explosion. This was the dynamic of our relationship for the better part of a year. I felt drained, constantly anxious. I was losing touch with my friends, abandoning my hobbies. I felt like I was losing myself. Then came the incident. It was a Friday night, a few months back. We were watching some new sci-fi movie on the couch. It was pretty good. There's a scene where the male protagonist, an experienced pilot, gives some quick advice to the female protagonist, a rookie, during a chaotic space battle. It was a blink and you'll miss it moment. Keep your throttle steady on the approach, or something like that. Sasha grabbed the remote and slammed the pause button. The screen froze on the actor's face. I knew that look on her face. Here we go. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice tight. I tried to play dumb. "See what? The alien ship?" "No," she said, turning to me. "The mansplaining. It was so blatant." I just sighed. I was tired. It had been a long week at work. Sasha, he's the senior officer and she's a trainee. He's just telling her how to not get blown up. Wrong answer. "That's the entire problem," she said, her voice rising. "The narrative automatically assumes the man must be the expert and the woman must be the student. He didn't even let her try first. He just steamrolled her with his supposed expertise. It's a classic example of men refusing to trust female competence." I rubbed my eyes. I really didn't have the energy for this. "Okay, I see your point," I said, trying to de-escalate. "Can we just watch the movie?" "So you agree it was problematic?" she pushed. This time, for some reason, I couldn't just do the usual nod. I was too worn out to pretend. "Honestly, not really. It just felt like a normal line in a movie. I don't think it was that deep." Her face hardened. "I see," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "You're being defensive. You can't even acknowledge a simple instance of cinematic patriarchy." I held up my hands. "I'm not being defensive. I just have a different opinion. Is that okay? Can we just have different opinions about a movie?" That was it. That was the line I crossed. The idea that my opinion could be different, yet still valid, was unacceptable. She stared at me for a long moment. It felt like she was looking at a complete stranger. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "It's clear you're not in a place to have a constructive conversation. You're not willing to listen." She stood up from the couch. "I'm not going to talk to you until you've had some time to think about your attitude and you're actually ready to hear me." She turned, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door with a sharp, definitive click. The silent treatment had begun. I sat there alone in the living room, the movie still paused on the screen. I felt the usual wave of anxiety and exhaustion wash over me. Here we go again. For the first day, it was the usual routine. I woke up Saturday morning and she was already in the kitchen, making coffee. I said, "Good morning." Nothing. Not even a glance. She just moved around the kitchen as if I were invisible. I made my own coffee and sat at the small table, drinking it in silence while she scrolled through her phone. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I spent most of the day in the office, pretending to work, just to be in a separate room. Every time I walked out for water or food, she'd make a point of turning her back to me or walking out of the room. It was juvenile, but it worked. It made me feel like a ghost in my own home. By Sunday, the guilt was really setting in. Was she right? Was I just a defensive jerk? Maybe I should have just agreed with her. I thought about knocking on the bedroom door and apologizing, just to get it over with. But something stopped me. I was just so tired. The thought of having to go through another groveling apology, followed by a 90-minute lecture, felt more exhausting than the silence itself. So I didn't. I sent a text to Carl instead. "Hey man, you busy?" he replied almost instantly. "Nope, just watching the game. What's up?" I typed out a brief summary of the situation. Sasha's giving me the silent treatment again, this time because I didn't agree with her take on a movie. A few seconds later, my phone started ringing. It was Carl. "Dude," he said, without even a hello. You're telling me she hasn't spoken to you since Friday night because of a movie? Yeah, pretty much. I could hear him chuckle on the other end. And you're letting this get to you? It's hard not to, I said. The atmosphere here is awful. Listen to me, Heath, he said, his tone shifting from amused to serious. This isn't a punishment. This is a gift. This is a vacation. I was confused. What are you talking about? Think about it. You don't have to walk on eggshells. You don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing. You don't have to listen to any lectures about the patriarchy. You have been granted the gift of peace and quiet. Do not squander it. I'd never thought of it that way. She's expecting you to crawl back and beg for forgiveness, he continued. Don't do it. Just live your life. Be happy. See what happens. We talked for a little longer, and by the time I hung up, my perspective had completely shifted. He was right. Why was I sitting here feeling guilty? I hadn't done anything wrong. I just disagreed about a movie. For the first time, a little spark of defiance lit up inside me. I decided to take his advice. That evening, I went into the storage closet. In the back, under some old blankets, was my old console. I hadn't used it in almost a year because it was always a source of conflict. I pulled it out, blew the dust off, and hooked it up to the main TV in the living room. Her TV. The one she used for her important documentaries. I put on my headset, sent a message to my gaming group, and within minutes I was logged in. The sound of my friends' voices filled my ears. Heath, where have you been, man? We thought you were dead. Sorry, guys. Been busy with stuff. We played for hours. We laughed. We yelled. We talked trash. It was normal. It was fun. At one point, the bedroom door opened. Sasha came out, probably to get a glass of water. She stopped dead in the middle of the living room. She saw me on the couch, headset on, controller in hand, a huge grin on my face. I saw her out of the corner of my eye. I glanced over, gave her a little nod, and turned my attention back to the screen. She stood there for a full 30 seconds, just staring. Her expression was a mixture of shock and utter disapproval. I could feel her trying to project her anger across the room. It didn't work. I was in my zone. She let out a loud theatrical huff, turned around, and went back into the bedroom, slamming the door. My friends on the headset heard it. Whoa, what was that? One of them asked. Just the wind, I said, and we all laughed. That night, I slept on the couch. Not as a punishment, but by choice. It was actually really comfortable. The next day was Monday. I got up, got ready for work, and left before she was even awake. On my way home from work, I did something I hadn't done in ages. I stopped at the gym. I had a great workout, felt fantastic. I came home feeling energized. Sasha was in the kitchen preparing some kind of kale and quinoa salad for herself. She gave me a cold look as I walked in, clearly expecting me to come crawling back after a full day at work. I just smiled, said hey, and went to the fridge. I pulled out a thick ribeye steak I had bought on my way home. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw it. She hated red meat, called it carcinogenic death. I seasoned it up, fired up the cast iron skillet, and seared it. The whole apartment filled with the smell of garlic, butter, and steak. I could see the disgust on her face. I didn't care. I sat down at the table with my perfectly cooked steak, some roasted potatoes, and a beer. She sat opposite me, silently picking at her sad-looking salad. The silence was still there, but it felt different now. It wasn't her silence anymore. It was my silence. It was peaceful. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. I was rediscovering my own life. I'd go to the gym, come home, cook what I wanted, and play games with my friends. I started reading a book series I'd been putting off. I deep-cleaned my office, organized my stuff. My home was starting to feel like my home again, not an ideological battleground. Sasha, on the other hand, seemed to be getting more and more agitated. Her silent treatment was supposed to be a tool of control. It was designed to make me miserable and desperate for her approval. But it was having the opposite effect. I was happy, genuinely, noticeably happy. I was sleeping better. I was less stressed. I was laughing again. And she was the one who was miserable. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, forced to watch me thrive in her absence. Around day 5 or 6, she realized her primary weapon had failed, so she switched tactics. She started employing passive aggression. She would have long, loud phone calls with her friend, always in the next room, with the door open. The conversations were clearly for my benefit. "I just don't know what to do," she'd say, her voice full of fake anguish. "He's just so immature. He can't handle a real conversation. He just shuts down and runs away to his little video games. It's like he has no emotional intelligence at all. I try so hard to help him grow, but he's just stuck in his toxic ways." The first time I heard this, it stung a little. But then I just put on my noise-canceling headphones and turned up my music. She couldn't get to me anymore. She started leaving articles open on the shared laptop, things like "Signs your partner is a narcissist" and "How to deal with male fragility." I'd just close the tabs without reading them. She would sigh dramatically whenever she entered a room and I was there. She would mumble things under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear the tone but not the words. None of it worked. I was a rock, a happy, peaceful rock. The second weekend of the silent treatment arrived. Carl invited me out for a beer with a few of our old friends. I told him I'd be there. As I was getting ready to leave, Sasha stood in the hallway, blocking my path to the door. She had her arms crossed, a furious expression on her face. She didn't say a word, but her message was clear. "You're not allowed to go out and have fun while I'm punishing you." I just looked at her. "Excuse me," I said politely. She didn't move. She just stared at me, her eyes burning holes into me. I didn't get angry. I didn't push past her. I just stood there, waiting patiently. After a full minute of this silent standoff, I simply turned around, went into the living room, opened the window, and climbed out onto the fire escape. Our apartment was on the second floor, so it was an easy drop to the ground. I heard her gasp as I disappeared from view. I met up with my friends and had the best time I'd had in years. We didn't talk about anything heavy. We just told stupid jokes, reminisced about old times, and talked about sports and movies. It was easy. It was effortless. It was a conversation where I didn't have to scan every word for a potential ideological crime. When I got home late that night, she was waiting up for me on the couch. All the lights were on. I could tell she had been stewing for hours. I walked in, and the look she gave me was pure venom. She had expected me to be locked out, to have to beg her to open the door. My fire escape maneuver had completely outplayed her. I just nodded at her, said, "Hey," and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. She was fuming. I could feel the waves of rage coming off of her. She was losing control completely, and she had no idea what to do. Her entire playbook was useless. The person she had spent 2 years carefully conditioning to respond to her every whim was gone. In his place was this calm, happy stranger who was completely immune to her manipulation. I knew a confrontation was coming. The silence was about to break. She had failed to make me miserable, so her only remaining option was to try and force a reaction with a direct assault. I didn't know when it would happen, but I knew it would be soon. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready. The final confrontation didn't happen that night. I think my fire escape exit had genuinely thrown her for a loop. She didn't have a script for it. She retreated to the bedroom, and I just went about my evening, eventually falling asleep on the couch again. The next day was a Sunday. It was the 2-week anniversary of the Great Silence. I woke up early, feeling refreshed. I decided to make myself a big breakfast, the kind I never made, because she'd complain about the smell or the unhealthy nature of it. I'm talking bacon, eggs, fried potatoes, the works. The whole apartment smelled incredible. As I was sitting at the table, enjoying my food and reading the news on my phone, she emerged. She was dressed to go out, wearing workout clothes. She walked into the kitchen, pointedly ignoring me and the feast on my plate. She opened the fridge and took out her plastic bottle of pre-made green smoothie. She stood there, leaning against the counter, sipping it and staring out the window. Her silence felt different this morning. It wasn't just angry anymore. It was brittle, desperate. I finished my breakfast, took my plate to the sink, and washed it. As I was drying my hands, I noticed her watching me in the reflection of the microwave door. Her eyes were narrowed. She was calculating something. I just ignored it and went into my office to start my day. A couple of hours later, I heard a loud crash from the living room, followed by a sharp gasp. I immediately got up and went to see what happened. On the floor was my favorite coffee mug, shattered into a dozen pieces. It was a gift from Carl years ago, from a brewery we visited on a road trip. It was unique and irreplaceable. Sasha was standing over it, her hand over her mouth in a perfect pantomime of shock. "Oh my God," she said, her voice filled with fake horror. It was the first thing she'd said to me in 14 days. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "I am so sorry. I was just dusting the shelf, and my hand slipped." I looked at the shattered mug. I looked at the shelf. I looked at her. There wasn't a speck of dust on the shelf. Her hands were clean. It was obvious. She had broken it on purpose. This was her last-ditch effort. She was trying to force a reaction. She wanted me to yell, to get angry, to finally show some emotion that she could then use against me. She wanted me to say, "How could you break my favorite mug?" So she could pivot to, "Oh, so you care more about a stupid mug than you do about my feelings." I saw the entire flowchart of the conversation laid out in my mind. I felt a flash of anger, a genuine one. She had destroyed something that had sentimental value just to score a point in a game she had already lost. But then the anger just vanished. It was replaced by a profound sense of clarity. I wasn't playing this game anymore. I looked at her, still holding her shocked pose, and I gave her a small, tired smile. "It's okay," I said, my voice calm and even. "Accidents happen." I walked past her, went to the kitchen, got the dustpan and brush, came back and started sweeping up the pieces. Her jaw literally dropped. This was not in her script. I was supposed to be angry. I was supposed to be upset. My complete lack of a reaction left her with nowhere to go. She just stood there, speechless, as I carefully swept every last shard of my favorite mug into the pan. I dumped the pieces in the trash, put the dustpan away, and then turned to her. "No worries," I said, as if she'd spilled a glass of water. "I'm going to go finish up some work." I went back into my office and closed the door. That was the moment the dam broke. I had invalidated her last-ditch effort. I had refused to give her the fight she so desperately wanted. About 10 minutes later, my office door flew open. Sasha was standing there, and she was shaking with rage. Her face was red, and her eyes were blazing. The mask of composure was gone. The silence was officially over. "What is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice cracking. I swiveled my chair to face her, but didn't stand up. I just looked at her calmly. "I break something you love, and you don't even care? You just smile and say, 'It's okay'? You have no feelings at all." I took a deep breath. I was annoyed, but getting angry wasn't going to fix the mug, so I just cleaned it up. "This isn't about the mug," she yelled, stepping into the room. "This is about you." For 2 weeks, you've been acting like a complete sociopath." She started pacing back and forth in the small office space. It was time for the grand monologue. "I try to give you space to think, to reflect on your toxic behavior. And what do? You act like you're on vacation. You play your stupid misogynistic video games. You go out with your Neanderthal friend. You prance around here smiling like you don't have a care in the world." She gestured wildly around the room. "I have been in agony. I have been waiting for you to show 1 ounce of remorse, to be a man and apologize for your behavior. But you can't, can you? Your male ego is too fragile for that." I just sat there and listened. It was kind of fascinating in a detached way. It was like watching a nature documentary about a creature I no longer understood. "I have given you everything," she continued, her voice getting louder. "I have tried to educate you, to make you a better person. I have pointed out your problematic language, your unconscious biases. I have done the emotional labor for this entire relationship, and what do I get in return? Nothing. Just this. This cold, childish indifference." She finally stopped pacing and stood in front of my desk, leaning forward with her hands on her hips. "So, that's it? You have nothing to say for yourself? After 2 weeks of treating me like I don't exist?" This was my cue. This was the part where I was supposed to get defensive, to argue back, to get dragged down into the mud with her. But the last 2 weeks had changed me. I wasn't that person anymore. I looked up at her, my expression neutral. "You were the one who said you weren't going to talk to me," I stated, simply and without malice. "You told me not to talk to you until I was ready to hear you. I was just respecting your wishes." This factual statement seemed to enrage her more than any insult could have. "Don't you dare try to twist this around on me," she shrieked. "You knew exactly what I meant. I was trying to teach you a lesson. It's called setting a boundary." "A boundary is something you set for your own well-being," I replied, my voice still steady. "Using the silent treatment to punish someone until they do what you want isn't a boundary. It's manipulation." The word manipulation hung in the air between us. I had never used it before. It was a truth I had known for a long time, but had never dared to speak out loud. Her face went from red to pale. She was losing. For the first time in our entire relationship, she was losing an argument, and she knew it. Her arguments weren't working. Her anger wasn't working. Her guilt trips weren't working. So she pulled out the very last weapon in her arsenal, the one she had been saving, the nuclear option. She straightened up, a look of grim finality on her face. "You know what, Heath? I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice suddenly cold and formal. "I cannot be in a relationship with someone who is so unwilling to grow, so completely devoid of empathy." She took a deep breath, preparing for her big, dramatic exit line. "If you don't care about me or my feelings, then I'm done. I'm leaving. I think we're over." She delivered the line perfectly. It was filled with a sense of tragic weight. She stood there, chin up, waiting. She was expecting me to break, to panic, to stand up and beg her not to go. She was expecting me to say, "No, Sasha, please don't leave. I'm sorry. I'll do anything." That's what was supposed to happen. That's what always happened in her version of the story. I looked at her. I thought about the constant anxiety, the eggshells, the lectures, the silent treatments, the feeling of never being good enough. Then I thought about the last 2 weeks, the peace, the quiet, the freedom. The choice was so incredibly easy. I gave a small, slow nod. "Okay," I said. Just that one word. "Okay." It was like I had just detonated a bomb in the room. Her expression of tragic resolve shattered into pure, unadulterated shock. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. This was not in the script. This was not in the playbook. "What?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I said okay. I repeated, my voice still calm. I think that's for the best. I agree. We should break up. I stood up from my chair. For a moment, I think she thought I was going to come over and hug her or plead with her. Instead, I walked past her, out of the office, and went straight to the hall closet. I opened it, pulled out the roll of black trash bags we kept for yard waste, and walked back to her. I held them out for her. Here, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You'll probably need these for your stuff. She stared at the roll of black bags in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. Her brain just could not process what was happening. The entire power dynamic of our 2-year relationship had just been reversed in the span of 30 seconds. She, the one who wielded the threat of leaving as her ultimate power, was now being handed garbage bags. She didn't take them. She was frozen. I'll go pack a bag for myself and stay at Carl's for the night so you can have some space to pack, I said, already thinking practically. You can take your time. Just let me know when you're done so I can come back. This seemed to snap her out of her trance. You're kicking me out? She whispered, her voice full of disbelief. You just broke up with me, I corrected her. You said you were leaving. I'm just trying to make it easier for you. She looked around the apartment at the life we had built, as if seeing it for the first time. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flash of genuine panic in her eyes. The real kind, not the theatrical kind. This was real. This was happening. Her bluff had been called, and the pot was being raked away from her. She finally, slowly, took the roll of bags from my hand. Her fingers were trembling. Without another word, she turned and walked into the bedroom. This time, when she closed the door, the click was quiet. It sounded final. I went into the living room, grabbed my backpack, and threw a few days' worth of clothes and toiletries into it. I sent a quick text to Carl. Hey man, can I crash on your couch for a couple of days? Long story. His reply was instant. The couch is yours for as long as you need. Door is unlocked. I picked up my keys from the bowl by the door. I paused, looked around the apartment. It was strange. I thought I would feel sad or heartbroken. I didn't. I felt light. I felt like a massive weight that I hadn't even realized I was carrying had just been lifted off my shoulders. I opened the front door, stepped out into the hallway, and closed it behind me. As I walked down the stairs and out into the fresh air, I took a deep breath. It was the first breath I had taken in 2 years that was entirely my own. I was free.